One major issue in trad climbing is judging whether placements that you make are actually solid or not solid, i.e. should you trust them with your life to sit on, abseil off or fall off onto, or when you should definitely not trust them. Knowing the difference is absolutely key, and in this episode we're going to get into that. So I'm just at the top of Gorge Crag in Glen Nevis just now. I've just set up my rope, I've got my standard trad rack, and we're going to go down, and I'm going to take you through a piece of learning, a tactic if you like, that really propelled my judgment, ability to judge the quality of trad placements. Now this is something that you won't find in a textbook about learning to trad climb, and it's something that I didn't do until quite late on in my apprenticeship in trad. At first I learned to trust gear incrementally, and I would say pretty slowly, and actually I would go as far as to say it was by far the biggest limiting factor in my progression in trad. I found that I progressed a lot faster in sport climbing and bouldering, and I got to the point where I could climb, I don't know, 8A plus on sport climbing, but I was still stuck on extremely easy trad climbs, and the reason why that was I just felt like I was soloing all the time. I just put in a cam or a wire and I had no idea whether I could follow onto it or not. Would it hold me? Would it not hold me? I didn't know, and I didn't know how to know. Now gradually, with making belays and abseiling and a little bit of climbing with other people, which unfortunately was in short supply for me, and just generally getting out and doing a lot of routes over time, I gradually did make progress, and that's how most people do it. And especially if you climb with an experienced leader and you can second them and actually just see their gear placements, that is a good way to progress. However, the tactic I'm going to show you now made me jump start ahead and gain a much deeper sense of judgment really in the quality of placements. The basis of this idea is that there's no substitute for actually hanging off the piece of gear you've just placed and knowing whether it will hold or not. And that's what we're going to be doing a lot of in just a minute. So let's head down the rope. Here I am attaching a backup to my belay, in this case just a second tree. I've tied an overhand knot in the rope and I'm adjusting the length of it so that it can take some of the load, and also position the rope where I want it to be for abseiling down in the correct spot. Also, please excuse the background noise in this video. The gorge below is pretty loud. So one of the big problems with learning to place gear is that often you're doing it on lead, and you're not only thinking about the climbing, but you have real consequence if you actually fall onto your gear. So testing whether it's actually going to even hold your weight in that scenario is kind of dangerous if you actually get it wrong. And everyone has to get things wrong during a learning process, that's part of it. So as I was saying at the top of the crag, you can do this by seconding other leaders and seeing how they place gear, and that will get you quite a long way. But just as with learning to actually climb on rock, learning to place gear is quite nice if you can do it on the safety of a top rope, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Here in Scotland, actually right here in Glen Nevis, I was quite often starting to try either hard existing routes that I was wanting to red point on trad, or actually trying new routes where they needed cleaning, and so I needed to abseil down and clean out the grass from the cracks and brush the lichen off the holds and things like that. And so I found myself abseiling down climbs, inspecting not only the holds and the moves, but also the gear placements. And I still had this same issue of you put a wire or a cam in a crack and you think, is that really good? I'm not really too sure, without weighting it. The turning point was when I actually started to have to back aid down overhanging terrain, where if you abseil down you just end up in space, and that's exactly what's happened here. I've had to re-belay to the same anchor that I've made for the camera here, and attach my rope to that in order to stay close into the cliff. And when I started to do that, I was then hanging on every piece of gear but in the safety of the top rope. And I'll give you an example. This crack's not all that overhanging, but let's say it was, and let's say I abseiled down a little bit and I need to put in a runner to stop myself from swinging away from the cliff. So I would say that looks like silver Camelot size. So let's get silver Camelot size. I can clip it into the rope and hold myself in like that. But if I want to actually do some cleaning, then it may actually be easier if I clip myself directly to it. And that's why I've brought my sport climbing quick draw here, to clip myself straight to it. And I would also be thinking, well, this is going to be a runner on the climb when I actually come to lead it. So is it actually good? And one of the ways I can test that is to actually slacken off this top rope and put my weight on the runner. So now I'm completely hanging on the runner. I'm still in a position of safety, because if that runner were to blow, then I would go onto my gree-gree. Of course, if you want to be really safe, you would hold onto the dead end of the rope, or just put an overhand knot in it just to make sure. But this rope has plenty of weight in it, and it's a thick rope, so it will grab me. Although I definitely recommend you do it by the book and always keep your hand on it. I'm happy that this actually holds my weight, but will it actually hold a fall? And another way to test this is just to have the rope just a little bit snug, and I'm going to give it a good test, a good bounce test. And that is an absolutely bomber cam, that's not going anywhere. So I'm really like bouncing my weight on it. And I can start off quite gingerly and then get a bit more aggressive as I gain confidence that it is actually a good piece. And I'm pretty sure that's good. And it was from doing that that I made so much more progress in my judgment and also my confidence that that's a good piece. Let's just pick another example though. Just a little bit higher. Hopefully the GoPro will pick this up. Let's say I put the purple cam in there. So that cam, I know it's a little bit in the shade here, so hopefully you can pick this up. But that cam is just at the top of an opening where you can see it's not going to function very well there. So that might be where I would put it. But what about when the lead rope pulls that up? Will that cam just walk? Yes, it will. It will walk in the way, but then stop. Now, what could I do about that? Well, one thing I could do is extend it. I could extend it with a quick draw so that the rope will not make it walk up and down so much. At a certain point it will. If I climb away to the right, it will pull it. But that's not quite as good, that placement. I would prefer, if I could, to use a wire there. So let's see. So look at that. That's really good if it's pointing straight down. I don't know if you'll be able to see into there, but there's a little bump in the crack just where my finger is, just in the back of the nut there. And it just provides a little bump to actually catch the wire, and it's kind of sticking against that. And I like that because it's going to keep it nice and jammed in the crack. And if I give it a good tug down the way, it's going to be fine. The issue is, if you take a big fall and swing it away out into space, then that nut will get a pull in that direction first. And can you see how that just pulled out a little bit? So when I'm actually placing the nut, I'll pull it down to check it holds a downward pull, but I'll also pull it out to check that it stays put in an outward pull, and it doesn't all that well. So I would actually reposition it a little bit. See, if I just move it a bit deeper in the crack, then it still lifts a little bit, but it's still very secure. And I'm happy that there's no way that's ever going to come out. So although I learned a lot of this stuff aiding down the way to clean routes, I also spent a bit of time aid climbing up the way across roofs as well. And I think that could be a really excellent method of actually learning how to place, trust, or not trust, but judge whether it's safe to trust your gear placements in a position of safety while you're still attached to a top rope. So basically what I'm going to do here is just aid up this crack with the top rope in place. So I've gone to the top of the crack first, I've abseiled down, and I'm just going to climb up, aiding, taking the gear out below me, and then when I get to the top, I can either just walk off or abseil back down or whatever I like. So it's a very simple procedure, and I'll go down a bit and then I'll aid back up and show you what I mean. So in order to get my weight off this runner and not drop down too far, I've got a couple of choices. I can either use my Jumar. When I'm doing this sort of faffing around on ropes, I generally always have a Jumar, and you can see that I've made a foot loop. So I don't know, about a metre or so, that I can just hook into a carabiner there for stowing it away when it's on my harness. But it's just really handy for getting tension to get my weight off the runner that I'm on and back onto the rope. But you don't need to do that. You could just pull up on the runner and then sit on the rope, taking the gree as you're doing it. So then I can take that piece of gear out. So what I'll do is I'll go down and I'll come back up. Okay, see you soon. I abseiled right to the ground here and started climbing from there, but you could start from higher up if you liked. While I'm going down, I'll just say something about how I'm belaying myself for doing this. If you aren't confident moving up and down the abseil rope on the gree, you could get a belay from a climbing partner, just as you would do if you were free climbing the route on a top rope. When I first did this, I did it on my own using a gree, just taking in the rope as I climbed back up and tying an overhand knot in the dead rope every time I place a runner, just as you've seen me do a moment ago. But today I'm going to switch to the shunt, since that's what I'm used to for self-belay these days. I've actually just made a separate video on how I use the shunt for self-belay free climbing, but it's not really necessary for aid climbing, since I can take a hand off at any time to take in the rope and tie a backup knot every time I place another runner. This is a very parallel crack, so I think it's going to be cams. I've already used a couple of the sizes that I need. Now that one up there, you can see that that's actually totally fine, but it's quite open, so it might move about a bit. So what I can do is place that just in the narrowest bit of the crack there. Quite happy with that, as long as it stays at that angle. I'm just going to get my 2 quick draws. Now, there's a number of things you could use for this. You could use a Petzl Connect, you could use a Fifi hook, but I quite like just 2 beefy sport climbing quick draws to clip it into. So I'm just going to pull up and I'm going to sit on that piece of gear. So I'm 1 foot above the ground, but I'm protected by my top rope, and I'm happy that that's a good piece. And I'm just going to advance like that. Shall we put a nut in next? So I can see an opening in the crack quite far in, and again the issue is I want to get it in enough that I want it to drop down the back. So I'm just going to get exactly that depression there, and that looks really nice. Oh, I say that, but then it is moving about a bit. The tricky thing with wire sometimes is getting them seated. The other thing is I'm just going to put the back of the carabiner against that side of the crack where it's resting on, rather than there, just in case it kind of opens the gate like that. So it'll sit more neatly against there. So I'm actually going to fiddle with that, get it in the right spot. That feels more secure. So I'm just going to transfer onto a single quick draw on that one, and I'm happy with that. You could of course take more quick draws or connects or slings or daisy chains to attach yourself to 2 pieces at the same time. And the other thing that would be useful, if you need to go long distances between the runners, is a foot loop to actually stand up higher. Perfect, that looks really good, that. So I've got no footholds, and I'm deliberately not wearing my rock shoes, so that I'm going to have to totally trust this. So I'm actually just going to use the foot loop from a Jumar here to stand up on this one. So get my weight centered, foot in the foot loop, and then I can stand on that. So I'm just going to, with my foot in the foot loop, I'm still sitting on this other piece. I'm just going to get my weight up on that red cam there, and let's get my other quick draw. I'm going to actually put the foot loop up there, stand up, put myself in, there we go. And again, you can really bounce test it to see that's solid. I would totally fall onto that, and in fact those 2 pieces are so good that they would be an excellent belay anchor. Sharp upward tug to get the wire out. Back on my harness. Now, the next bit of crack is very parallel. Getting wires in it would be challenging. There is maybe a spot, do you see here? There's a little opening in the crack with a little divot in it. that might be the best place to take a wire, but it's still, I don't think it's going to work. You know, see how I turned it round and it's a lot better. I mean, that would be okay, but I wouldn't say that's a good wire. Why? Because it's right on the outside of the crack, and if it takes an outward pull, it's going to come out. I really would want that seated deeper in the crack, but I'm not going to be able to get it in there. What I really need here is a cam. I'm going to need to use that silver cam again. Now, that's fine. That's fine. It's the whole way up is these are really good placements. So I'm going to sit back and check my top rope's tight. I'm going to sit back on my red, take my foot out the foot loop. You can of course bring 2 foot loops to stand in if you like. Get my foot back in the foot loop. I'm going to give that a test by putting my foot in it, weighting it, and I'm going to stand up on it, clip myself into it, and sit on it. There we go. And you'll find that you get into a bit of a rhythm of doing this. This crack stays the same size here, so I'm going to do another grey. This is why you end up having 2 on your harness. So if I was leading this section and I climbed up here, I put in 1 grey cam at the bottom of this little narrow section. As soon as I move any distance above that, I become unprotected. But the thing is, where I really want a runner, which is probably there, it's exactly the same size of crack. So I need 2 of the same size, so often having your cams doubled up is a really good idea. Okay, let's sit back on the first cam. Remember, if your top rope is on a gree or some other belay device, you could be getting belayed on a top rope from a climbing partner as well. But remember to take in your top rope as you're climbing. For a change, I'm going to try and protect it with a wire. Why? Because on a crack like this, I could like sink all of my rack of cams very quickly and then run out of them. So I want to be able to get good wires in. That's quite good. Do you see how the angle of pull is down and slightly out? And in that way I can get it to stick and get a good tug, and then it'll seat. I'm not going to tug on it too hard because I'm about to put my full weight on it. So I don't really need to tug on it. Get a quick draw in there. Sit on the first runner. Get that right up at the top. Foot back in the foot loop. I'm going to stand on it, gently weight it, and stand up. And put myself up into this top part of it. Now the crack changes character completely up here. It opens out at the outside, but it still stays kind of small on the inside. So it's going to get a lot more interesting here. However, possibly the first placement is still the same size of cam. The only thing is, in there, the crack's a little bit raggedy. So it's kind of opening out inside the crack. It may be better with a nut. Why? Because with the crack opening out inside, it'll encourage the cam to walk backwards into the crack. And if the crack's opening as it does so, it could walk in and then open completely, and then it's not going to be seated at all in the crack there. So I don't know if you can see into the crack there, but this piece of rock here, I don't like that. It's just, see, it's a bit crumbly. So I don't really want my nut sitting against just that. So I'm not too happy with that placement actually. It would have to be lower down, deeper in the crack. So I'm not that happy with that. I'm going to try the size down, see if that will go. Yes. Now that went deeper onto a more solid looking bit of rock, and I much prefer that. Again, I'm thinking about the way the gate sits, so it's got space. It's not going to open because it's, you know, if it's turned around that way, that's a bit more awkward. it's actually leaning against the rock. I don't really want that.
Of course, you can also practice placing gear while just standing on the ground, and that is a great place to start to learn how gear fits into placements. However, actually using it to climb like this is far more impactful for confidence in my experience, since you have to weight every single placement.
Just that little movement, all that was the carabiner was there, was jammed against the crack, and it just slid. But that little kind of whoo feeling is what you're really getting over when you're doing this training exercise. And by the end of it, you just are so much more confident hanging around on trad crags, and hopefully you'll have a firm understanding of what runners work and what runners don't. Well, I think that'll do for now. I'm definitely not recommending that you use this technique, but what I'd like to get across is that it really, really helped me. Perhaps it was advantageous that I already had a degree of competence in placing trad gear before I actually did this. However, I still think that doing it with this top rope and with the protection of it is still safer than leading and learning it that way. Learning to trad climb and learning to deal with trad gear is not a straightforward thing. It really does take a long time, and what I like about this is it just accelerates the process. I've climbed this crack with perhaps 25 gear placements. I've weighted them all, I've tested them all. I've also experimented with some that I haven't used. So the exposure to learning how to deal with cracks, how to judge what size of nut or cam to place is really, really great. And it just means that the next time I come to lead a route, I need to spend a lot less conscious effort worrying about what size to actually select. I'm more likely to select the correct size and correct type of gear more quickly, and then once it's in, I'm more likely to be able to make an accurate judgment about whether it's a bomb-proof runner that I would happily fall onto, or whether it's iffy and I need to back it up, or climb accordingly, you know, and climb in a manner as if I just cannot fall off, or such and such, or retreat, you know, whichever. But using up less mental focus on the gear aspect, because I already have gained some expertise in it, means that I can focus more on the actual decisions about the moves. And I can also zoom out and focus more about the broader decisions that I have to make at every stage of a trad lead, about rope work, safety, and all the other things you've got to deal with. Okay, I'm going to go and look at this new route, and we'll see you in the next episode.